Once upon a quiet evening, in a small cozy cottage at the edge of a green forest, there lived a kind woman who had everything, except the one thing her heart wished for most. She longed for a child. Every day she looked out her window at the birds feeding their little ones and whispered softly, "If only I had a child as small as a flower, I would love her with all my heart." One chilly night, as the wind sang through the trees, there came a gentle knock at her door. An old woman stood outside, her cloak covered in silver raindrops. Her eyes sparkled like tiny stars. "I know your wish," the old woman said kindly. "Plant this seed with care, and your heart will bloom with joy." The woman took the glowing seed, warm like sunlight, in her hands. She thanked the stranger, who disappeared into the mist before dawn. The next morning, the woman planted the seed in a small flower pot and watered it with trembling hands. The soil shimmered, and by evening, a golden flower grew from the pot, bright and beautiful like a sunbeam. She leaned close to smell its sweet scent, and just then, the petals began to open. Inside, nestled at the heart of the flower, lay a tiny girl, no bigger than a thumb. Her eyes sparkled like dew, and her smile was as warm as summer. The woman gasped softly. "Oh, you are perfect," she whispered. "I shall call you Thumbelina." From that moment, Thumbelina brought laughter and light into the cottage. She slept in a walnut shell bed lined with soft rose petals, drank from a tiny tulip cup, and sang sweet songs that made even the birds listen. The woman loved her dearly and guarded her like treasure. But one night, as thunder rumbled and rain splashed against the windows, something strange stirred outside. A pair of bulging eyes blinked through the darkness. A muddy toad crept up to the window sill, croaking softly. He saw the tiny girl sleeping peacefully under her rose-petal blanket. "What a pretty bride she'll make for my son," he croaked, licking his lips. Slowly, he pushed open the window with his wet, slimy hand. The room was dark except for the flicker of a candle. The toad hopped quietly to Thumbelina's bed, lifted the walnut shell gently, and placed it on a large leaf. The wind howled as he jumped out the window and disappeared into the night, carrying the tiny girl away. The next morning, the woman woke and rushed to Thumbelina's table. Her heart stopped, the walnut shell was gone. She searched the room, calling her name, but there was only silence and the echo of rain. Tears filled her eyes as she looked at the empty flower pot. Meanwhile, deep in the dark swamp, Thumbelina slowly opened her eyes. She was lying on a wide green lily pad, floating on still water surrounded by tall reeds. The air smelled of mud and moss. Above her, the sky was gray and heavy with fog. On the bank stood the ugly toad and his even uglier son, both croaking loudly. "Wake up, little one," said the old toad. "Soon you shall marry my son and live with us in the swamp forever." Thumbelina's tiny heart pounded with fear. She tried to run, but the lily pad was surrounded by cold, black water. The toad laughed and hopped away to prepare for the wedding, leaving her alone. Tears rolled down her cheeks. "Oh, dear mother," she whispered, "will I ever see you again?" She looked around desperately. The only sounds were croaks and the splash of rain. But beneath the water, little fish were watching her. They felt sorry for the tiny girl with the golden hair. Whispering to each other, they began nibbling at the green stem holding her lily pad in place. With a soft snap, the stem broke. The lily pad began to drift away, slowly carried by the stream. Thumbelina gasped as the current pulled her free from the swamp. The reeds waved, "Goodbye," and the old toad's angry croaks echoed faintly behind her. The little girl clung to the edge of her leaf, her eyes full of hope and fear. The forest ahead was vast and wild, the wind strong against her face. She didn't know where the water would take her, but anywhere was better than the dark swamp. And so, under the fading light of dawn, Thumbelina's journey began, tiny, brave, and alone in a world far bigger than she ever imagined. Dizzy, would she ever find her way home? Or was this only the beginning of something far greater? Morning light sparkled on the river as Thumbelina floated on her lily pad, far away from the dark swamp. The air was fresh, and the water sang softly around her. Tiny butterflies fluttered above, and silver fish swam below, watching the little girl drift by. Thumbelina looked around with wide eyes. "Where am I?" she whispered. Everything was so big, tall green reeds rose like trees, and the ripples of water looked like rolling hills. Though she was frightened, she felt a tiny spark of hope inside her heart. Soon, she reached a place where the river slowed. The lily pad touched the soft bank, and Thumbelina stepped onto the grass. She felt the warm sun on her face for the first time since her capture. "I'm free," she said softly, smiling for just a moment. But her peace didn't last long. A shadow passed over her, something buzzing and bright. Before she could hide, a giant beetle with shiny green wings swooped down. Its legs clutched her tiny arms and lifted her high into the air. "Who are you?" cried Thumbelina, her voice trembling. "I'm Beetle, the most handsome in the forest," he boasted. "You'll come to my party tonight. Everyone must see you." The beetle carried her deep into the forest, where glowing mushrooms lit the path and beetles of all colors danced and laughed. He placed her on a golden leaf in the middle of a bright clearing. "Isn't she lovely?" he said proudly to his beetle friends. At first, the other beetles came close, staring at her tiny hands and shining hair. But soon, their faces turned mean. "She's not like us," one hissed. "She has no hard shell," said another. "And look, she has only 2 legs." Thumbelina lowered her head, her heart heavy. The beetle frowned. "Maybe you're right," he said, losing interest. "She's not one of us after all." Without another word, he carried her out of the party and dropped her gently on a soft daisy. Then he flew away, leaving her all alone. For a long time, Thumbelina sat quietly, watching the stars appear in the night sky. The forest around her whispered with strange sounds, rustling leaves, chirping crickets, and the faraway hoot of an owl. She missed her mother terribly, and tears filled her eyes. "I only want to go home," she whispered. But she had no idea which way home was. Then, a tiny firefly floated by, lighting up the darkness. It landed beside her, its little light glowing warmly. Thumbelina smiled. "Thank you," she said softly, and curled up beneath the daisy petals for the night. As she drifted into sleep, the firefly's golden light flickered beside her like a small promise, hope, shining even in the darkest forest. Dizzy, but what new adventure waits when the sun rises again? Morning came with soft golden light spilling through the trees. Thumbelina yawned and stretched under her daisy petal blanket. The forest glowed with dew, and tiny drops sparkled on every leaf like diamonds. For a moment, she forgot her fears. Birds chirped high above, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of wildflowers. But as she took a sip of water from a morning flower cup, a loud humming sound filled the air again. Bzzzzzzz. Thumbelina's heart skipped. She looked up and saw the same beetle from last night, his shiny wings glittering green and gold in the sunlight. "Well, well," said the beetle proudly. "You're still here. I couldn't stop thinking about how different you are. Maybe my friends were wrong about you. You are rather pretty." Before Thumbelina could answer, he lifted her again with his strong legs and carried her through the forest air. The world below blurred, trees, flowers, and streams looked like colorful waves. This time, the beetle brought her to a grand place hidden deep in the woods, a tall oak tree with glowing sap lanterns and hundreds of beetles buzzing about. Music filled the air, tiny beetle drums and the hum of shiny wings. "This is my party," the beetle said, puffing his chest. "And you are my special guest." He placed her on a high platform made of leaves and petals. Everyone turned to look. Some beetles gasped, some smiled, and some whispered behind their shells. Thumbelina stood quietly, trying to be polite. One bold beetle, with red wings and golden spots, flew closer and said, "She's too soft. Look at that smooth skin. And her eyes, too big." Another added, "And where are her feelers? How strange." Soon, the laughter spread like wildfire. "Too thin. Too pale. Too human," they teased. Thumbelina's cheeks turned pink, and tears welled up in her eyes. She tried to smile, but her lips trembled. The green beetle frowned. "You know, maybe they're right," he said, scratching his head. "You don't look like us at all. I can't have everyone laughing at me. Without another word, he lifted her again and flew out of the party. The bright lights and music faded behind them as they entered the quiet part of the forest. He landed on a soft bed of moss beside a wide bluebell flower. You can stay here, he said, looking a little sorry. I thought you'd be fun, but you're just too different. Then, with a shrug, he flew away, leaving her alone once more. Thumbelina sat on the moss, wiping her tears. Different, she whispered. Why does being different make me so alone? But the forest around her seemed to whisper back kindly, the rustling leaves, the chirping birds, the soft hum of bees in the distance. Slowly, her sadness began to fade. She looked up at the sunlight filtering through the trees and smiled faintly. I may be small, she said, but I will be brave. With careful steps, she climbed onto a tall clover and gazed out at the vast, green world. Everywhere she looked, there was something new, sparkling streams, fluttering butterflies, and endless fields beyond the forest. She made herself a little home between the roots of a tree. She built a bed of soft petals, made dishes from tiny shells, and used acorn caps to catch the morning dew. Days passed. Thumbelina sang songs to the flowers and befriended the gentle butterflies who often came to rest near her. But as summer slowly turned to autumn, the air grew colder. The leaves changed color, and the forest became quiet. Food grew scarce. Thumbelina wrapped herself in dry leaves to stay warm, but her tiny hands shook with the chill. One windy evening, as she searched for shelter, she spotted a small hole in the ground beneath a bush. Warm air drifted from inside, carrying the smell of grains and nuts. Thumbelina peeked in and saw a cozy little home lit by a flickering lamp. Hello, she called softly. A kind old field mouse appeared, blinking in surprise. Oh dear, what a tiny creature. You'll freeze out there, child. Come in, come in. Thumbelina stepped inside, her heart full of relief. The mouse gave her a blanket made of soft fluff and a cup of warm grain tea. You can stay as long as you like, said the field mouse kindly. Winter is coming soon, and you'll need shelter. Thumbelina smiled gratefully. For the first time in many days, she felt safe again. But deep below the earth, something stirred in the darkness, a pair of red eyes watching from a long tunnel. The field mouse didn't notice. Thumbelina didn't know. But the shadows whispered quietly, her next adventure was about to begin. Dizzy what secret lies beneath the ground? Days passed slowly in the cozy burrow of the field mouse. Outside, the world turned white with snow. Frost covered the grass like silver dust, and icy winds howled through the trees. But inside, everything was warm and quiet. The little mouse's home smelled of wheat and dried flowers. Thumbelina helped sweep the floor with a tiny straw broom and arranged seeds and nuts neatly on the shelves. Such a helpful little girl you are, said the field mouse kindly. If only you had someone to take care of you forever. Thumbelina smiled shyly. I already have you, she said. The mouse chuckled. Oh, you sweet thing. But I'm old. You'll need someone young and rich, someone strong to protect you. Tomorrow, I shall take you to meet my good friend, Mr. Mole. He lives underground. A clever fellow, very rich, very wise. Thumbelina tilted her head. A mole? Yes, said the mouse, smoothing her whiskers proudly. He has long tunnels and chambers filled with treasures, buttons, coins, shiny stones. You must be polite to him. Perhaps, if you are lucky, he'll ask to marry you. Thumbelina's heart sank. She didn't want to live underground. She loved the open sky, the sun, and the soft songs of birds. But she didn't want to hurt her kind friend's feelings, so she said nothing. The next morning, they went through a narrow tunnel that led to the mole's grand home. The earth smelled damp, and roots hung down like brown ropes. The deeper they went, the darker it grew. Finally, they reached a large chamber lit by glowing stones. The mole sat there, wearing a coat made of dark velvet fur. His eyes were small and blind, but his smile was wide. Welcome, he said in a deep, slow voice. What a surprise to have visitors. Thumbelina curtsied politely. Thank you, sir, she said softly. The mole showed them around his tunnels, walls lined with shiny pebbles and bits of broken jewelry he had collected. Beautiful, isn't it? He said proudly. No light, no noise, just peace and safety. Thumbelina nodded, but her heart felt heavy. She missed the colors of the forest, the sound of birds, and the warmth of the sun. Here, everything was gray and still. Then the mole said, I have something to show you. Follow me. He led them into a long tunnel that smelled faintly of dust and moss. Halfway through, he stopped and pointed to something lying in the dirt. It was a bird, motionless and cold. It must have died when winter came, said the mole. Poor foolish creature. Always singing when the sun is warm, never thinking about the cold days ahead. That's why I live underground. The world above is too dangerous. The mouse nodded. He's right, dear. It's best to stay safe below the ground. But Thumbelina looked at the small bird and felt a deep ache in her heart. Its feathers were dull now, but she could tell it had once been beautiful. She knelt beside it and gently brushed the dirt from its wings. Oh, you poor thing, she whispered. You must have loved the sky. When the mole and mouse walked ahead, she quietly tore a corner of her leaf cloak and covered the bird to keep it warm. Then she placed a tiny flower beside its head. That night, while the mouse snored softly, Thumbelina couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the bird lying cold and alone in the tunnel. Finally, she picked up a small lantern and tiptoed back. The air in the tunnel was cold and still. When she reached the spot, she knelt down again beside the little bird. I wish you could fly again, she whispered. And just then, she felt something, faint but real, a small, gentle heartbeat under her hand. Thumbelina gasped. You're alive, she said softly. She ran back, brought a blanket made of moss, and covered the bird carefully. She brought water in an acorn cap and placed a few seeds beside it. Don't give up, she said, tears shining in her eyes. I'll take care of you. Day after day, she returned to the tunnel. She spoke softly to the bird, sang to it, and kept it warm. Slowly, the swallow began to breathe easier. Its eyes opened weakly. Thank you, it whispered one evening, its voice faint as the wind. You saved me, little one. Thumbelina smiled. Rest now. When spring comes, you'll fly again. Weeks passed. Outside, snow melted, and green shoots began to rise through the earth. The swallow grew stronger, flapping its wings gently. But as joy bloomed in Thumbelina's heart, the mouse had other plans. Spring is near, she said. And you've spent too much time in that tunnel. It's time to prepare for your wedding. Wedding? Thumbelina gasped. Yes, dear, said the mouse, smiling. Mr. Mole has agreed to marry you. You will be his lovely wife. Isn't that wonderful? Thumbelina's heart froze. The dark tunnels, the endless night, the cold earth, she couldn't live like that. But the mouse didn't understand. You'll have food, warmth, and safety forever, she said. You should thank me. Thumbelina smiled weakly, but inside, her heart ached. She didn't want treasures or tunnels. She wanted sunlight, flowers, and freedom. That night, she sat beside the recovering swallow one last time. Dear friend, she whispered, I helped you live again. But soon, I may never see the sky. The swallow lifted its head weakly. Do not lose hope, it said softly. Spring brings new beginnings. Trust the wind. Thumbelina looked up at the tiny hole of light at the end of the tunnel. Above, the world was waiting. Somewhere beyond the earth, flowers were blooming again. Dizzy would the little girl of the flower find her courage before it was too late? Days turned into weeks, and the earth grew warmer. Spring whispered above the ground, but deep below, Thumbelina could only dream of sunlight. The mouse's burrow, once cozy, now felt like a cage. The walls seemed smaller, the air heavier, and the thought of marrying Mr. Mole filled her tiny heart with dread. Every day, the field mouse chattered excitedly about the wedding. You'll be such a fine wife, she said. Mr. Mole is rich. Think of all the food, the warm tunnels, and safety. No storms, no owls, no dangers. Thumbelina smiled faintly, but her heart felt hollow. But no sunshine either, she whispered to herself when the mouse wasn't listening. One morning, Mr. Mole came to visit. He brought a string of shiny beads, a small button as big as a table, and a slice of sweet root cake. "My dear Thumbelina," he said, bowing awkwardly, "I have begun digging a new home for us. It will be grand. You shall have your own chamber next to mine, filled with fine things. You'll never need to see the light again." His words made Thumbelina shiver. Never see the light again. Still, she thanked him kindly, for she was too gentle to be rude. A few days later, the mole said, "You must come with me today. I've found something interesting while digging a new tunnel." He led the way through the damp earth, his claws scraping softly against the walls. Thumbelina followed, holding a small lamp made of glowing moss. The field mouse came behind them, humming cheerfully. After walking a long while, the tunnel opened into a wide chamber filled with cool air. "There," said the mole proudly, pointing to the corner. Thumbelina gasped. Lying there, in the soft dirt, was the swallow she had saved during the winter, its wings still dusty, its feathers dull. "Oh no," she whispered, running forward. "My poor friend." The mole frowned. "Ah, yes, that's the one I found months ago," he said. "I sealed off this tunnel since it was no use. Imagine flying around all day and singing in the cold. Such silly creatures. You'll never find me doing that. I prefer the quiet of the earth." The mouse nodded. "He's right, dear. Birds don't think ahead like moles do." But Thumbelina knelt beside the swallow, brushing the dirt gently from its wings. "You don't understand," she said softly. "This bird is kind and brave. It's not foolish, it's free." The mole wrinkled his nose. "Free? Pa. What use is freedom when you can have comfort and safety? You'll understand when you live with me." Thumbelina said nothing. She only looked at the bird, remembering its promise, "Spring brings new beginnings. Trust the wind." When the mole and mouse turned to leave, Thumbelina stayed behind for a moment. She placed her hand on the bird's wing and whispered, "I'll come back." That night, while everyone slept, she crept quietly through the tunnels, carrying a small bundle of moss, petals, and seeds. The air was cool, the silence deep. She followed the faint scent of feathers until she reached the chamber again. The swallow was still there, motionless. Thumbelina knelt beside it. "Dear friend," she whispered, "if there's even a little life left in you, please wake up." She covered the bird with soft moss and placed petals over its chest. She rubbed its wings gently to warm them and poured a drop of water onto its beak. Hours passed. She sang softly, her tiny voice trembling in the darkness. "Sleep no more, little bird of the sky. The sun is calling, the wind will fly." Then, she heard it, a faint flutter. The bird's chest moved. Its eyes opened weakly, glimmering in the dim light. "Little one," it whispered, "you saved me again." Thumbelina smiled through her tears. "Rest, dear swallow. Spring is here. You must grow strong." For many days, she visited secretly, bringing food and water. The mole and mouse never noticed. The bird healed slowly, and each day, its song grew stronger. Then one morning, the swallow said, "It is time. I must return to the sky." Thumbelina nodded, though her heart ached. "I'll miss you," she said. "Come with me," the bird urged gently. "Fly with me to the land of sunshine and flowers. You don't belong here in the dark." Tears filled her eyes. "I can't," she whispered. "The mouse will be angry. And the mole, he's planning our wedding." The swallow looked at her with kind eyes. "Then promise me this, when the time comes, when the world above calls your name, you will not be afraid to fly." Thumbelina nodded slowly. "I promise." The bird stretched its wings and rose into the air, filling the tunnel with a rush of wind. It circled once around her, then disappeared through a small hole that led to the surface, vanishing into the blue sky above. Thumbelina stood alone, her hair blowing in the breeze the swallow left behind. The moment was both beautiful and heartbreaking. She walked back through the tunnel quietly. The mouse greeted her cheerfully, but Thumbelina said little. That night, she lay awake, listening to the faint sounds of the world above, crickets, wind, and the whisper of wings far away. The next day, the field mouse handed her a small crown made of golden threads. "We must start your wedding dress soon," she said happily. "You'll be the prettiest mole bride ever." Thumbelina's fingers trembled as she touched the crown. "Do I really have to live underground forever?" she asked softly. The mouse smiled. "Of course, dear. You'll never go hungry again." Thumbelina turned away, hiding the tears that filled her eyes. She thought of sunlight, of flowers, of the swallow soaring through the clouds. Her heart longed for the world she once knew. But she remembered her promise. When the world above calls your name, you will not be afraid to fly. That night, Thumbelina sat alone at the tunnel's end, looking toward the small circle of moonlight far above. She placed her hand over her heart and whispered, "I won't forget." And though she didn't know it yet, the wind that brushed her cheek carried the first call of her destiny. Dizzy, the time to fly was coming soon, and the earth itself could not hold her forever. Spring had come at last, but deep beneath the earth, Thumbelina's world still felt cold and gray. Above ground, the sun warmed the fields, flowers opened their petals, and soft winds carried the songs of new life. But in the tunnels of the mole, no light ever reached. The field mouse was busier than ever, preparing for the wedding. She had gathered grains, ribbons made from flower threads, and bits of cloth Thumbelina had sewn from petals. "Isn't this exciting?" she chirped. "You'll live like a queen. Imagine, never hungry, never cold, never wet." But Thumbelina could imagine only darkness. A world without birdsong, without light, without color. Every time the mouse spoke of the wedding, her chest grew tight, as if the air around her was shrinking. That evening, while the mouse and mole sat discussing the feast, Thumbelina quietly slipped away. She carried a tiny lantern made from a polished shell and followed the familiar tunnel, the one that led to the secret place where she had last seen the swallow. When she reached it, her heart leaped. There, in a beam of faint light from a crack in the earth, sat her friend, the swallow, alive and strong. His feathers shimmered softly in the dim glow. "Thumbelina," he chirped, his voice bright as the dawn. "I hoped you'd come." She smiled, tears shining in her eyes. "You're alive." "Oh, I knew you would be." The swallow fluttered his wings, sending a soft gust of air through the tunnel. "Thanks to you, little one. You gave me warmth when I was cold, and kindness when I was weak. I'll never forget it." Thumbelina sat beside him and told him everything, the plans for the wedding, the darkness, the sadness that filled her heart. "They say I'll be safe," she whispered, "but it feels like I'll be trapped forever." The swallow tilted his head. "You were born from a flower, Thumbelina. You belong to the light, not the shadows. Come with me. I'll take you far from here, to green meadows, blue skies, and bright blossoms." Thumbelina hesitated. "But I have no wings. I can't fly like you." "Then hold on to me," said the swallow gently. "My wings will be yours." Her heart beat fast. She wanted to go, more than anything, but fear held her still. "The field mouse has been kind to me," she whispered. "If I leave, she'll be angry. And Mr. Mole, he'll come looking." The swallow looked at her kindly. "Sometimes, little one, the hardest part of life is leaving what's safe to find what's right." Thumbelina looked down at her hands, thinking of the woman who had planted her, of the golden flower that had bloomed, and of the tiny bed made of rose petals. She missed that warmth, that love, that light. She looked up at the swallow. "If I go with you, where will we go?" "To the land of flowers," said the swallow softly. "Where the air smells of honey, where butterflies dance all day, and where people as small as you live among the petals. You'll never be lonely again." Thumbelina's eyes widened in wonder. The land of flowers, could such a place truly exist? But before she could answer, the sound of voices echoed through the tunnel. "Thumbelina," called the mouse. "Come along, dear. The wedding is tomorrow." Thumbelina's heart stopped. The mouse's footsteps grew closer. The swallow spread his wings. "It's now or never," he whispered. Thumbelina looked at him, then at the tunnel behind her. Her heart raced. "I can't," she breathed. "Not yet." The swallow sighed softly. "Then promise me this, when the day comes and your heart says fly, don't wait. The world above will welcome you." Thumbelina nodded slowly, tears on her cheeks. "I promise." The swallow nuzzled her gently. "I'll be waiting. When you hear wings in the wind, it will be me." Then, with a powerful beat, he rose into the air, gliding toward the crack of light above. Thumbelina watched, her heart torn between fear and hope, as the swallow slipped through the opening and soared into the blue sky beyond. She stayed there long after he was gone, staring at the faint glow left behind. Her small hands clenched around the flower charm she wore around her neck. "The land of flowers," she whispered. "A world where I belong." The next day came too soon. The mole arrived wearing his finest velvet coat. "My dear bride," he said, bowing deeply, "today is our wedding day." Thumbelina trembled. "Must I really go?" "Of course," said the mouse. "It's your duty. You'll thank us later." As they led her through the dark tunnels, Thumbelina's steps grew slower, her breath tighter. Her promise echoed in her heart, "When your heart says fly, don't wait." At the tunnel's end, she saw it, a faint circle of sunlight shining through a crack in the earth. It touched her face, warm and golden. Her heart whispered, "Now." She turned sharply, dropped the flowers she was holding, and ran faster than she ever had. The mouse shouted after her, and the mole roared angrily, but Thumbelina didn't stop. She climbed toward the light, hands and feet slipping on the dirt, until she burst through the earth and into the bright spring air. The world was alive around her, the sky wide and blue, flowers swaying, birds singing. She breathed deeply, the sunlight warming her tiny face. She was free. But in the distance, above the trees, she heard it, a familiar cry. The sound of wings. The swallow had returned. He circled down gracefully, his feathers shining in the sun. "I told you I'd come," he said. Thumbelina laughed, joy and tears mixing on her cheeks. "Then take me with you," she said. "I want to see the world above." The swallow lowered his wing. "Climb on, little flower girl." And so, Thumbelina stepped onto his back, her heart full of hope. Together they rose into the sky, leaving behind the tunnels of darkness and sorrow. Below, the mouse and mole could only watch in shock as the tiny girl soared higher and higher until she was nothing but a speck in the blue. The wind rushed past her face, cool and bright, carrying the scent of blossoms. Thumbelina held tight as the swallow flew over forests, fields, and rivers that sparkled like silver ribbons. She laughed aloud, her voice carried by the breeze. "I'm flying. I'm really flying." The swallow smiled. "And this, Thumbelina, is only the beginning." Dizzy but what wonders and surprises await her in the land of flowers. The wind danced around Thumbelina as the swallow soared higher and higher, carrying her far above the dark tunnels and cold earth she had left behind. The sky stretched endlessly, painted in gold and blue. She clung tightly to the bird's soft feathers, her tiny heart racing with joy and disbelief. Below them, the world shimmered. Rivers sparkled like glass ribbons, and fields of wildflowers swayed like colorful oceans. Thumbelina could see her reflection in little lakes, tiny and glowing with freedom. For the first time, she wasn't afraid. "This is the sky," said the swallow, his voice gentle and proud. "It belongs to no one. Here, you can go anywhere your heart wishes." Thumbelina smiled, her eyes wide with wonder. "It's so big, and so beautiful," she whispered. They flew over mountains topped with snow, over forests where waterfalls fell like silver threads. The swallow sang as he flew, his song bright and clear. Thumbelina closed her eyes and listened, letting the music fill her heart. After many hours, they reached a warm, glowing land. The air smelled of honey and sunshine. Below them spread an endless garden, fields filled with giant flowers of every color, red, gold, pink, and violet. Butterflies floated lazily, and dewdrops glittered like gems on the petals. "Welcome," said the swallow softly, "to the land of flowers." He flew lower, circling a shining lake surrounded by lilies as tall as trees. In the center stood a huge white blossom, its petals open wide like a star. "That one," said the swallow, "is the queen blossom. It's where the flower people live." He landed gently on one of the petals. Thumbelina stepped off, her feet touching the soft, glowing surface. Everything shimmered with magic. From the heart of the flower came faint laughter, tiny, musical voices. Then, from the center of the blossom, appeared a young man no taller than Thumbelina herself. He wore a crown made of gold pollen, and his wings sparkled like glass in the sunlight. His eyes widened as he saw her. Who are you?" he asked softly, astonished. Thumbelina bowed shyly. "My name is Thumbelina. I come from far away, and I've been searching for a home." The prince smiled warmly. "Then you've found it," he said. "You are one of us. You are no larger than a flower, and your heart shines as brightly as one." He offered her his hand. "I am the prince of the flower folk. Will you stay here, where every petal is your home, and the sun never fades?" Thumbelina hesitated, looking at the swallow. He chirped kindly, "This world was made for you, little one. My journey ends here, but yours begins now." Her eyes filled with tears. "You saved me," she whispered. "I'll never forget you." The swallow bowed his head. "Whenever you see a bird flying free in the sky, think of me." With that, he spread his wings and soared upward once more, circling above the flower like a guardian. His song echoed through the air, a melody of farewell and joy. The prince led Thumbelina deeper into the blossom, where tiny fairies and butterflies greeted her with smiles and songs. They placed a crown of white petals on her head and dressed her in silken threads spun from sunlight. "Today," said the prince, "we welcome the flower maiden, our lost sister returned." The petals of the flower shimmered, opening wider as a warm breeze flowed through the air. Bells made of crystal chimed, and 1,000 butterflies rose into the sky, filling it with color. Thumbelina stood beside the prince, her heart glowing brighter than ever. Then, in a gentle voice, he asked, "Will you stay here, Thumbelina? Will you be my queen and share the garden of eternal spring?" Thumbelina's eyes sparkled. She thought of the dark tunnels, the lonely nights, and the many creatures she had met, some cruel, some kind. And she thought of the woman who had planted her from a flower. She smiled softly. "Yes," she said. "I will stay." Cheers rose through the petals, and soft music filled the air. The prince lifted her hand and placed a golden petal ring upon her finger. From that moment on, Thumbelina became the flower queen, the guardian of all blossoms, the spirit of joy and light. As night fell, the stars twinkled above, and Thumbelina stood on her flower, watching the swallow's shadow vanish into the moonlight. She whispered, "Thank you, for giving me my wings." The garden around her glowed softly, and the flowers bent toward her, whispering in the breeze. For the first time in her life, Thumbelina felt truly home. Dizzy, but what secret gift will the swallow bring her when he returns next spring? Many moons passed in the land of flowers, where Thumbelina now lived as queen. Every morning, she awoke to sunlight spilling through golden petals, and every night, the stars danced above her like diamonds. Butterflies carried her from flower to flower, and hummingbirds sang her name in songs of spring. The flower prince was kind and gentle. Together, they cared for the blossoms, helping them open to the sun and guiding raindrops to thirsty roots. Thumbelina's laughter filled the meadows, and everywhere she went, flowers bloomed brighter. Yet even in her happiness, a small part of her heart still remembered the swallow, the friend who had saved her when she was lost in darkness. Sometimes, when the wind blew soft and warm, she would look up at the sky and whisper, "I hope you are safe, dear friend." One golden afternoon, while the flower folk danced among the tulips, a shadow passed over the garden. A soft, familiar song filled the air, the same song that once echoed through the cold tunnels long ago. Thumbelina gasped. That sound, could it be? From the clouds, wings flashed in the sunlight. The swallow swooped down gracefully, his feathers shining with silver and blue. He landed on a tall sunflower and bowed his head. My little flower queen, he chirped joyfully, I told you I would return. Tears sparkled in Thumbelina's eyes as she ran to him. You came back. You really came back. He chuckled softly. How could I not? I wanted to see how far my brave friend had flown. The flower prince joined them, smiling warmly. You are the swallow who saved our queen. For that, you are forever welcome here. The swallow puffed his chest proudly. She saved me too, once upon a winter's night. It seems kindness always finds its way back. The air shimmered with sunlight and song as the flower folk gathered around. They placed garlands of blossoms around the swallow's neck, and Thumbelina held out her hand. Stay with us a while, she said. Rest here in the garden you helped me find. The swallow stayed for many days, telling stories of faraway lands, of mountains that touched the stars, of seas that glowed under moonlight, and of children who dreamed of fairies. Every evening, he sang as the sun sank low, and the garden glowed like a dream. When the time came for him to leave again, Thumbelina stood on her flower, watching him stretch his wings. Will you visit again next spring? She asked softly. The swallow nodded. Every spring, when the first blossom opens, I'll come to see you. And I'll carry your story to every corner of the world, so no one forgets the girl born from a flower. He lifted into the sky, circling above the garden. His song echoed across the land, bright and full of life. Thumbelina watched until he vanished into the horizon, a single spark against the golden sky. She placed her hand over her heart and whispered, Goodbye, dear friend, and thank you. Then she turned toward her kingdom, her smile as warm as the sun. The flowers bowed as she passed, and the wind carried her laughter far and wide. From that day on, whenever a swallow flew over the gardens, the flowers would lift their petals higher, as if waving hello. And if you listen closely, on quiet spring mornings, you might still hear a gentle song floating through the air, a song of friendship, courage, and a tiny girl who found her place in the world. Cherry Blossom and so, Thumbelina, the flower queen, lived happily ever after, among blossoms, sunlight, and the song of the swallow. Cherry Blossom.